Great. Hello, everyone. Welcome officially to our December STEM Talks. We are very, very excited to cover the topic of neuroscience this month. But I'll do kind of a first little bit of an intro into UHN STEM Pathways. If you have never been to one of our events before, but it looks like a lot of you have, but our team does outreach programming for the University Health Network, and we do this both virtually as well as in person. And one of our major virtual initiatives is our career panels. So every month we host a career panel where we have three individuals in healthcare talk about what they do on a day-to-day basis and how they got to where they are. And for our enjoyment and my personal enjoyment, the topic of this month is neuroscience. So we'll have three individuals talk about, what neuroscience means to them, what they do in this field, and how they got to where they are. And then we will have an open Q&A period after that. So as you can see, I am recording the event. So please just try to keep your cameras and microphones off so we don't disrupt the recording. However, feel free to, throughout the whole event, put questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand at the end. We can try to address any questions that you have for our panelists. So for those of you, though, that are here for your enjoyment, but also our certificate program, I just kind of want to give some information. Certificate program, to get your attendance, all you have to have is your first and last name spelled properly on Zoom. And you also need to complete our exit poll. So it'll be just a quick little Zoom poll with a couple questions to see what you have learned today. In terms of questions about the certificate program, please just only ask them directly to me or Trisha. We're trying to keep the chat focused on neuroscience focused questions, but you'll get all these updates over the course of the next hour. Before we get started, we do have a welcome poll. So we want to just see who is in the audience today. Do you actually like neuroscience? Do you want to learn more about neuroscience? I mean, I hope so, because there are so many of you in this call. And Trisha will launch that momentarily. So please fill that in. And with that in mind, we're just going to start the event so we can have more time for Q&A. So our first panelist of the day, whenever you are ready, Rashed, just take over screen share and talk about the work that you do.
All right. Everyone see this all right? We're all good? I can start?
Good to go.
Beautiful. All right. Hello. Wow, there's a lot of you out there. Hi. My name is Rashed Latif. I'm a clinical research coordinator here at Krembil Research Institute at the UHN. Um, I'm from Winnipeg. I moved to Toronto about a year ago. I've also lived in a bunch of different places. I lived in Ottawa for a bit, lived in Florida, lived in a small rural town in Manitoba called Morden. I've also lived in Kuwait, London, Thailand, Bangladesh. I've been around the world. But recently, I'm now situated in Toronto. I've been working at Dr. Karen Davis's chronic pain lab for about a year. A little bit about me. I love cooking. I love movies. I love working out. In fact, I'm going to go work out right after this. And fashion. A couple of pictures that I have here. That's the Winnipeg sign. That's Parliament Hill in Ottawa. Um, that's me after completing a hike. I love cooking, so I posted a picture of the noodles that I typically make. And I usually do a little bit of fashion stuff on the side. So that was just a sneak peek on my latest modeling shoot. In terms of my education, um, I went to the University of Manitoba. I got a Bachelor's of Science in General Sciences with a focus in genetics and psychology. There's no neuroscience program at the University of Manitoba. Actually, when I was there and I was part of the council there, I was actually trying to get a neuroscience program started there. And then during the pandemic, I attended the Summer School of Epidemiology and Public Health at the University of Ottawa, mainly out of boredom. But in terms of my neuroscience background, right out of university, I got hired at the University of Manitoba's Department of Psychiatry. And because we were the only psychiatry lab there, we were the main psychiatry lab, anytime a neuroscientist, psychologist, or psychiatrist needed someone to come and be like a research assistant or like a research student for a study, they just grab one of us. So because of that, I was able to get a wide variety of neuroscience, psych, mental health field. So I did a lot of work with cognitive behavioral therapy. I did some work with child psychiatry, looking at language acquisition. I even worked in the forensics field. So I got to work with people that were inmates at one of the Manitoban prisons. And one of my favorite studies that I got to do was I got people with schizophrenia and dementia and do some qualitative analysis on that. After Winnipeg, I moved to Ottawa. There I was a research assistant with the Institute of Mental Health Research there in Ottawa, looking at inflammatory biomarkers. So we would our main patient group that we were looking at for this research was people with treatment-resistant depression. So these were people that were on two different types of antidepressants and they didn't work as well. So we're trying to see if there's anything in their blood. That's a picture of me analyzing blood, by the way. If there's anything in the blood in terms of like inflammatory biomarkers that we could look at to see if there was anything that was affecting their resistance to treatment. We were also doing a study on ketamine, working on the same thing. If a couple of antidepressants didn't work, would ketamine be an effective method of helping out with depression symptoms and other mood disorders? But not only did we do inflammatory biomarkers, we did a lot of neuroimaging. So this was our MRI suite there at the Royal, at the Brain Imaging Center. And we just run some MRI scans. I never got to be too involved in that part because it was still during the pandemic and we weren't able to get too many patients in for that. But my coworkers did, and so they ran most of the neuroimaging stuff back there. And then finally, we come to UHN. We come to my chronic pain research lab where I'm the clinical coordinator. As most of our studies are with patients and participants, there's no actual pictures of me doing the study. So this is me actually training to run one of our machines. It's called the MEG machine. It's the magnetoencephalography machine, which is similar to an MRI. It uses magnets to read the brain, and it almost always works all the time. This is a picture of our lab. Very cute people. We went out and did like I forgot what it was, but it was like a clay thing. We all got like our own clay model thing that we got to paint afterwards. It was very nice. We also lab neuroimaging. We also do some sensory testing. So any participant that would come in, we would administer some stimuli, see how they react to it. And essentially, we were just looking at how living with chronic pain affects various facets of your life. Week in the life. It's a lot of emails. It's so many emails. I feel like I have 1,200 unread emails currently right now. And I try not to think about it until it's my working hours. So a lot of it's just emails, making sure that like stuff is getting pushed through the pipeline, making sure I got people in for studies, making sure I've got scans for studies. I also have to recruit those participants as well. As the de facto clinical coordinator / lab manager, it is also my duty to keep the morale up in the lab, hence the yapping. You need a dedicated yap hour in the day. We have a designated chair for yapping as well. It is very important. But other than that, in terms of like the actual science stuff that I have to do, I have to read a lot of papers. I got to do some data entry, putting stuff that we get from the research into like an actual spreadsheet, maintain records, and basically keeping the lab afloat, which also includes any sort of computer problems as well. That is a lot of my day-to-day, week in the life, what I do at this job. Why I chose this career. To be fair, as someone who I realize it's a very asinine thing to say, but we've all got brains. Most hearts work like you take a heart from any two people, they're gonna work basically the same. But you take two brains, they're gonna be very different. And I always it's a thought I had since like middle school. It's like one of those things. I've also really liked watching the show Criminal Minds. I don't know if you guys ever watched it, maybe too young to watch that, but they had a lot of things where they like delve into the psychology of people, and that was so interesting to me. And mental health. As someone who's always been confused about their own feelings and thoughts, this seemed like a no-brainer, haha, to be in this field.
Great, thank you, Rashed. I love the yap hour. I need to put that into my schedule.
It's important. It's very important. People underestimate the yap hour, but you need it.
Yeah, I think it should be a nice little concentrated time to set up over the course of the day. So, all right. So, next panelist is Courtney. Courtney, whenever you are ready, I will spotlight you, and you are free to go.
My name is Courtney. I'm a PhD student at the University of Toronto. I'm in the program at U of T called Laboratory Medicine and Pathobiology. It's a very multidisciplinary program, and everyone's working in a lab at a different hospital, essentially, studying all kinds of different biological disorders. So a little bit about me, my background. So I'm not from Toronto. I'm from a smaller town in Northern Ontario called Sault Ste. Marie. And I moved to Toronto about 3 years ago for grad school. So I'm in my fourth year now. In terms of hobbies, what I like doing outside of the lab, it's really important to have these. Otherwise, it's way too easy to spend like all day here. But I really like reading, traveling, running when I can, and hanging out with any and all animals. So at home, I have two rescue cats. This is Ren. This is my cat on the right that I got when I moved to Toronto. And in the middle is my sister's dog, or my nephew, Tarzan. And on the left is from my first co-op placement, which I'll explain a little bit. I really enjoyed that during my undergrad. So for my undergrad, I went to the University of Ottawa, and I did my studies in biochemistry, and I specialized there in microbiology and immunology. How I became interested in that, kind of going off from the last talk, it wasn't Criminal Minds, but it was NCIS. There was an episode where like I saw someone working in a hazmat suit, and I was like, I want to do that. So I started out in that field, and I really want to strongly suggest to everyone who is going into their undergrad to, if you're interested, participate in the co-op programs. You really get to try out what you're interested in and see if it's for you. You get to sometimes travel all over. I did co-ops in different places of Ontario. I even did one abroad in Portugal, and I highly, highly recommend taking advantage of that if you can. It was kind of actually in the last co-op that I did that I decided, maybe I don't want to work in a hazmat suit. Maybe I want to go into neuroscience. And that was one of the reasons why I'm now where I am. So I started out in my master's in the same lab here, and I transferred to the PhD program. So keep that in mind. That's an option as well. You don't graduate with your master's, you graduate instead with a PhD, but it's becoming more and more common nowadays. And in terms of the actual research that I do, it's on neuroscience, clearly, and stem cell biology. More specifically, we use 2D and 3D stem cell models in the lab to study all different types of neurodevelopmental conditions, as well as genetic developmental conditions as well. These are some images of these things that we call brain organoids, or they're using stem cells to make 3D tissues that sort of mimic different parts of how our brain develops. So neurodevelopment, if we were to break it down, it's formation of the neurological connections and the pathways in the brain. And maybe you've heard of stem cells before, but they're human cells, or they don't have to be human, but we work with human cells that are able to develop into many different types. So even amongst human stem cells, there's different forms. You can even take a blood sample or a skin sample, reprogram those cells into pluripotent stem cells, and then from there you can sort of give them a little recipe, give them some ingredients to coax them along and to become different types of cells. So in the lab, we're interested in more like neural cells. So this is a little schematic of different things that we can make, both in 2D and in 3D. Even different regions of the brain. Of course, they're not as complex, but they allow us to see something that we previously were not able to capture this early in development and in a human context. Okay, and then my specific project is outside of the brain, but still neural field. I'm interested in sensory nervous system development. So if you touch a hot stove, for example, you'll feel that sensation starting in your fingertip maybe, and then it'll travel from your peripheral nervous system all the way up to your central nervous system, where you're able to process that sensation and translate it into a response. So my project, I've kind of developed this 3D organoid system that essentially is, it has our peripheral sensory neurons in it. And I'm hoping to use this system to study neurodevelopmental conditions that have some sensory changes involved in them, or even things like chronic pain or peripheral neuropathy, for example, after chemo treatment, for example. And in terms of a week in the lab, it's 1 week is not the same. You're always doing something different. I guess the one thing that you're always going to be doing, at least in my type of lab, is maintaining your cells. They're pretty needy. Performing lab experiments, planning upcoming experiments. In my field, some of these experiments go on for months, like 3 months, sometimes 6 months. So it's a little tricky to keep up with that sometimes. Doing some data analysis, lab meetings, seminars, pretty much the same as any grad student maybe. But what's exciting about grad school is sometimes you get the opportunity to go to conferences. So you get to travel. I'm showing here like some images from a recent conference I attended in Montreal. And actually next week I'm going to one just outside of New York City. I've never been there, so I'm really excited to see it in the winter too. And then of course, lots of emails as well. So yeah, that is pretty much a week in my life. And then finally, why I chose this career. I think, many people want to make a difference. I think I'm a big thinker, probably an overthinker, and I think this is a way that I can use that to my advantage. STEM cells are really cool. I really enjoy learning about them. And I think it's fascinating to research something and try to answer questions that no one has ever looked into before. Although sometimes it is frustrating, I will say. A pro of this kind of work is you get to be creative and have a flexible schedule. But of course, like it really has to work for what you are looking to get at and what schedule you're looking to have as well. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. All right, so we have one final panelist of the day. Ibukun, whenever you're ready, feel free to share your slides.
So I'm Ibukun Akinrinade. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the Baines Lab in the Hotchkiss Brain Institute. And my supervisor is currently the director at the Cranbrook Brain Institute in Toronto. So yeah, I have a link in both places. Let's see. I'm Nigerian and I recently became a Canadian citizen. I'm a mom of boys, so I love soccer. So I love playing with my kids. I love reading, teaching, and visiting different places. I find it quite interesting, and I find visiting places as opportunities to tell stories to my kids. I've been a postdoc since 2021, and I did my PhD in Portugal, where I studied social behavior and how fear in others become contagious, and the neural systems that regulate fear transmission. So here you can see in the picture me playing soccer with my kids on my left, and on the right is a picture of some activities, which one of the activities I engage with, which is similar to what I'm doing here, which is science outreach. So I belong to an organization where we teach neuroscience to undergraduates and graduates and high school students. So it's really from elementary level to graduate level. So we try to teach neuroscience in developing countries. And then, so here you can see a picture of my lab during my PhD and my postdoc. And yeah, I went to big labs where I met different people, and it was an opportunity for me to learn from people of diverse backgrounds. So it was quite, they were quite interesting periods for me, and it's still quite interesting. So my work, I use mice models to study social behavior. And some of you may have encountered situations where you become sad or you become stressed, and then you sometimes need someone to calm you down, probably your friends or your parents. And in other cases, you just want to be alone. So I'm trying to understand how the presence of a social partner helps to alleviate stress or helps to make us feel better. And in other situations, when you're stressed and you're with someone who is also stressed, you even become more stressed, right? So it can be regarded as two sides of a coin. So I'm trying to understand how the brain regulates these two situations. How the brain regulates, on one hand, the presence of a calm partner buffering stress, and on the other side, the presence of a stressed partner increasing one's stress. And I do this in mice models, as I've said. And I do this because it's a component of social behavior, right? We see social behavior in different social individuals from different types of mammals. There are different types of social behavior, like finding the sources of food. Here you can see the blue teats. It's an interesting story in the UK, where there was this problem with the blue teats always pecking into the bottles of milk. And they do this by learning the behavior from others. So social behavior can be learned from others. It's also important for mate choice copying. It's important for maternal care. And it's, in particular for me, it's important for threat detection. And you would agree with me that in some situations, you might be walking on the street and you suddenly see people running. Instead of thinking about the cause of the reason why they are running, you run alongside them. So that's called transmission of fear. So this is an innate response to increase your chances of survival. So this can happen innately, or it can happen, So whenever this situation occurs in severe conditions, and you associate this to some external factors in the environment, sometimes it can trigger some memory in people. And that's what is regarded as the post-traumatic stress disorder. So one of the reasons why I study stress is because of the consequences that the dysregulation of stress can cause. So for instance, you see this person looking sad and requires a social partner to help alleviate the stress. So in the field of post-traumatic stress disorder, there has been different solutions, different remedies. However, it's been challenging to have a potent solution. And it's been proposed that the presence of a social partner would be the solution, would be the remedy for this stress disorder. And post-traumatic stress disorder is a very prevalent disorder. It occurs even in teenagers, in young adults, in veterans, and even in old people. And so it occurs amongst different kinds of individuals. So I find this a relevant question to answer. And a week in my life, well, the activities vary from week to week, but here's some examples of the things I do. I ensure my mice are well taken care of. I have to ensure their health status is optimal. I go for lab meetings so I can present my ongoing experiments to receive feedback from my colleagues, which is essential for shaping my research. And I also try to give feedback to other people, other colleagues that have their works presented. So this is important in a research environment to learn from each other. I attend meetings and I also carry out lots of experiments. I do analysis, I present my data, and I organize activities. So here's a screenshot of the meeting I attended. Here is a screenshot of an activity I carried out at a conference trying to talk about the Hotchkiss Brain Institute, where I currently am. And here's an example of the kind of data I acquire. So I look at signals in the brain, and we see these as, so this is a readout of a mouse when I introduce my hand into the cage of the mouse. So it increases the alertness in the mouse. And so the neurons I'm studying show an increase in activity. And why do I find this job relevant, or why did I choose this career? I think the career actually chose me. It's kind of followed me through my development. I remember during my undergraduate years, I have, so my background is anatomy. And after I finished my undergraduate program, I went visiting my department, and I met a professor there. And so I had an interaction with him, and he started telling me about neuroscience and how interesting neuroscience research is, and if I should give it a try. And that was what started the course of my journey into neuroscience. But on the broader sense, I find social interactions very relevant to us. It's very important, especially amongst you guys. You're always working in peers. Rarely do people want to work alone. Studying brain and behavior is cool, and it gives us the freedom to explore unexplored questions and also to impact lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ibuku. All right, it is Q&A portion time. So I'll start with like a pre-submitted question, and it's a nice kind of starting point, which is, why did you pick neuroscience? Out of all of the options out there, why neuroscience? I know some of you touched on that a little bit as you were presenting, but maybe it'll be a nice little focus hearing all of you back to back on how you chose that pathway. So maybe we can go in order of the speakers. So speaker number one, Rashed, whenever you want to talk about why.
Sure, yeah. No, I've always just been interested in neuroscience. A little personal detail, I have lots of people in my family that have suffered through different sort of neurological issues. And so like as like a child, I was always like in this world of neuroscience and like trying to just understand like what was happening. So like I heard of like MRIs at like such an early age. So because of that, it just sort of planted a seed from like 5, you know.
I guess I can go next. So I mentioned in my talk that I started out more with an interest in immunology. And that was originally from kind of watching an episode of NCIS, I guess. So, and I really enjoyed that. Like I did my undergrad thesis in a lab that studied tuberculosis. And I definitely could have stayed there. I think I would have really enjoyed it, but I also have a personal family connection to neurodegeneration. And I thought that in the long run, studying something more neuro-related I thought that it would kind of keep me more driven, I guess. And it's always easier to research something that you're personally connected to. I don't actually study neurodegeneration right now. I study neurodevelopment, but they kind of go hand in hand sometimes. And yeah, I think it's important to choose something that you really find interesting. Right now, like studying how the nervous system develops, like I don't think I could think of something more interesting than that to me. So
All right, Ibukun, how about you? Why neuro? I mean, you talked about it a little bit, but why?
Yeah, like I mentioned, it kind of chose me, right? So the professor I met had a background in neuroscience, and that was what got me interested. Like even from the classes, it became more practical. I saw how tangible it was. So I became more and more interested. And at that time, I was in Nigeria, and I found studying neuroscience a unique opportunity to network with other researchers. Um, and then social behavior. For my PhD, I actually worked with zebrafish, which are very cool social species. And of course, if you work with fish species, social behavior is the best question to answer with them. I mean, there are other questions, but for me, social behavior is the best. Yeah.
I like that you use zebrafish. I can't imagine handling zebrafish, so that's very cool to me.
Yeah.
All right, there's so many questions. Let's do some panelist-specific questions first. So I see Rashed, you presented first, so here I have a question for you first. What experiences helped you get hired right out of graduation, without having to get like a PhD or pursue a PhD like other individuals here?
Right, yeah. If I'm honest, the only reason I got that first job is because my friend from kindergarten hit me up the summer after graduation and was like, "Hey, there's an opening at my lab. Would you like to work?" So it really is. It's not what you know; it's who you know. Networking is a big skill. I feel like that's out of all the skills that I've ever attained in my life, I think networking is by and large the biggest and most important one. Make a lot of connections. Try to keep up with lots of friendships. That friend from kindergarten, maybe still hit them up from time to time. Maybe they got a job offering soon.
Use that LinkedIn, find those people from, yeah, your childhood.
Exactly.
All right, question for Courtney. What encouraged you to pursue a PhD in neuro versus psych versus any other pathway?
yeah, I still think about that question sometimes. No, I like I always enjoyed school more than like to me finding a job right now is kind of scary. And I also really just like the problem solving aspect of academia. And that just kind of like naturally goes along with doing a PhD or grad school. So I definitely you can get like awesome, amazing positions even after a bachelor's degree, a master's degree. But I also really like my project right now. So I kind of want to see it to its end. Yeah, I think that's kind of all I can say.
I just found you as well. All right, Ibuku, why are you studying the stress of animals instead of humans?
Good question. So what's cool is that mice have very high genetic similarity to humans, and we can actually tease out more in-depth questions using mice, in which we can then translate to humans. So in the end, I'm solving questions related to humans, but using mice as models.
And then follow-up question, have you learned anything from the mice that you've applied to your own life?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, just one simple um, thing I learned. So with mice, they get stressed easily. You have to be very gentle with them. You have to be very patient with them. They get to know you the more you interact with them. So I apply that to my own life. When I interact with people, I don't just make assumptions. I have to be patient and I have to be gentle.
That's a useful lesson that I guess mice have to teach you. All right, we got a couple questions that kind of the undergrad experience. So a lot of students like aren't really sure what program to choose, and then they're wondering like, did you change your program? Can you change programs? Like, how did you pick your undergraduate program, and was it flexible? Because a lot of them again don't know what they really like right now. So maybe we'll have everyone answer this, talk a little bit about their undergrad experience. So same order as our normal presenter order. Rashed, whatever you want to go.
Sure, yeah. My own experience, I started university as a pre-med because I wanted to do medicine like every other person that goes into science, essentially. And then after I did the MCAT, I was like, ooh, I don't actually want to do medicine. So at my university, there was like a pathway where you do like 3 years of undergrad and then you can apply to medicine. I don't know if that's like a universal thing. I'm just saying, just in case no one knows. But if you don't get into med or you don't do med, you can just do whatever you want afterwards and just finish off a degree. So at that point, I had already finished off most of like my genetics and psychology stuff. So I just figured, all right, I'll just do like another year, finish that off, and then see where the wind leads me.
I can only really speak to life science undergrads, I guess. I think the first year of most programs, at least like in Ontario, are very similar. Like you're taking a lot of the same courses. It's only when you get further up into the later years that there are more specializations that you can get into. Um, and I really want to stress that like you can change your program. Like I think I was the only one out of my friends that didn't end up changing their program at some point. Some people like went from completely different programs. Like it's definitely possible and it's also common. And that's something that I didn't realize really until I was in that environment. So they make it seem it is a stressful experience, but keep in mind that it's not like you're committed. You have to finish with that degree. Like a lot of the times you don't even get behind if you switch to a different program because you've already taken some of the same courses, for example.
Ibuku, how about you?
Oh, well, for me, I had my what's it called? Secondary school. I don't know what it's called here in Nigeria. And we divided into three classes: science class, arts class, commercial class. So once you're in the science class, then you have some choices to make, either to follow the biology line or the engineering line, basically. So then you have lots of options. So I guess it's sort of similar to what you have here. And you can actually change your specialization. It's to be honest, I mean, from my own perspective, it can be difficult. Take for example, if you're doing basic medical science compared to general science. So if you want to move from general to basic medical science, it can be a bit challenging, but if you're focused, then you can get there. The other thing I wanted to say is, so for my undergraduates, I studied anatomy. And so then for my master's degree, there's still some opportunity to choose other courses related to science or basic medical science if I wanted to stay in the research part or move into the industry, right? And then afterwards, then neuroscience is a part of anatomy and physiology. So yeah.
So they're basically saying it's flexible. You don't have to
Yeah.
worry about your program right now. I think I changed my program 4 times in undergrad and I finished in 4 years with a neuroscience degree. So like,
Yeah.
don't stress. You might think you like something and realize you don't like it and you can change it, especially within the science fields. All right. Oh my God, there's so many questions. All right. Next question I have. So I guess a lot of students are obviously in high school in the audience here. So they're wondering, like, what is the best, well, maybe one thing you did in high school to get you where you are today? Like, what should they think about, like, trying or doing now to kind of get them on a career path in STEM or in neuroscience specifically? So is there anything that you remember saying, yes, that was a good idea when I was in high school? And anybody want to go first, or I can just go in order of speakers again?
We can go in order. I got
Sure.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, tell us what you did.
Uh, outside of like doing every single science course that I could in high school, I also made sure to keep in touch with my teachers because they also went to the same university that I would be going to. They actually supplied me with cheaper textbooks. They supplied me with like old exams because they're not updating the exams, so you'll have the older ones and it still be fine. But also, uh, I did like what the main thing that I really tried to do was like maintain a circle of people that I knew were going into fields that I would be interested in. And because I was able to keep up with those people, I never felt like I missed out on an opportunity. I feel like that's like the main thing. Uh, really just try and keep your circle big, basically. And extracurriculars, do fun stuff.
Yeah, I would say something similar, I guess. Try to keep your you might have an idea of what you want to go into after, but maybe try to keep your courses pretty general in case you change your mind, and then that way you don't have to worry about not having taken a course that you might need. So keep that in mind. Something else would be, this kind of specific, but like keep a copy, like a digital copy of your transcript, like especially if you did IB, for example. I did IB, and then I never thought that I would need that ever, but then I applied to a scholarship like last year, and because if you do something like IB or AP, you can sometimes get credits in university. They needed to see that. So I had to like call up a teacher from my high school that I haven't spoken to in forever. And it would have been better if I had stayed in touch, I guess. But other than that, I think just try your best. Don't be too hard on yourself. And if you do extracurriculars, like make sure you enjoy them and don't just do them for, to have them on your CV. It's yeah, don't be too hard on yourself.
Buku, how about you? Anything you did in high school that you remember vividly now?
I think just be as smart as possible. Get as much good grades as possible because that's what's going to give you the flexibility to choose whatever you want to choose. Yep.
Straight to the point. I like that. All right. Okay. Students, a lot of them are saying your jobs are cool, but like, do you have a work-life balance? Do you have a social life? Do you see people? Maybe say word over speakers again. Do you? Do you?
I try to. I know that I can't function unless I do have a really good work-life balance. The main thing I do is I immediately turn off email notifications at 5:30 p.m. No one is allowed to contact me. I do not know my work people after 5:30 p.m. Monday to Fridays. I don't know what work is on Saturday and Sunday. I make sure that I I make sure I text my friends at least twice a day. I make sure that I see my friends at least 3 times a week. That's my goal. If I see my friends out 3 times a week, even if it's just for a coffee or watching a movie or whatever, I make sure that I meet that quota of 3 times a week. Because if not, I will go insane. I already live alone. It's gonna make me go absolutely cabin fever. I'm gonna get hay fever if I don't do this.
I would say I don't have quite as much flexibility, but I really try to keep a work-life balance. I think that it's really the only way that you are it's like sustainable to do like your experiments, I think. I think I would have gone crazy like a long time ago if I um like there's some weeks where something is due and I mean it also depends on what kind of research you do. Like for transparency, like I'm here many weekends because I decided to work with stem cells and organoids and sometimes they need you to be there every day at certain stages of their protocols. That's not every week. But little things that I do to try to make up for things like that is I try not to take my laptop home. That's a big difference from undergrad. Undergrad, I would like maybe like start work at like 10 p.m. and like go to bed at like 3 a.m. And that's not something I can do anymore because I'm expected to sort of have a 9 to 5-ish schedule in the lab, and that's just not sustainable. So something I try to do is work really hard while I'm here and then take a break when I'm at home. So I really associate home with being relaxed and hanging out with my cats, and and the lab with the work that goes on there. Of course, there's exceptions. Other than that, getting enough sleep, I think, is really important. I do see, friends, not 3 times a week, I would say, but, once, twice. And I have roommates that I really like hanging out with too, and I have friends in the lab. So I think it's not black and white for sure. And you learn to know yourself and what you need, and you know when to take a break, and you just have to kind of create a system that works for you.
Yeah, so for me, I think it also depends on the stage of your career. At the stage I am now, the balance is not there, to be honest. It's more work for me at this stage, but the good thing is that I have a goal, right? So once I achieve that goal, then I can have the rest I need. So that's the flexibility you have in the research field. So you can have like a period where there's intense experiments, you have to, work several hours, and there are periods where are not so intense, where you can actually chill out, even take days off during the week. There's that flexibility, which is one of the things I enjoy in my research. Yeah, so it's cool. And the social part, how I meet people. My library revolves, at this stage, my library revolves around my family. So I see them every day. Yeah, I have time to take care of my kids. I check up their schoolwork, I have time to attend their extracurricular activities. And if all that's done, I think I'm good. Yeah.
You see people, that's good enough.
Yeah.
All right, we got more questions. All right, the next question I saw a lot pop up. It was in general about extracurriculars. So, are there any extracurriculars that you would recommend they consider, whether that be in high school or in undergrad? Like, was there a club that they should think about or would be useful for them to explore? And just go same order of speakers just to make our life easier.
Sure. In high school, I did leadership. That was probably one of the biggest thing I did. So a lot of skills about like public speaking, a lot of learning how to take charge sort of thing. Being organizational, that was one of the biggest skills. Being good with time management was also something I learned from leadership in high school. In university, I volunteered and worked with Let's Talk Science, which is one of like my favorite experiences from undergrad. For those of you that don't know, it's a high school outreach program, not just high school, but like a youth outreach program teaching kids about science, and that was by far one of the most impactful things I've done in my undergrad career by far.
Yeah, for extracurriculars, I'm trying to remember high school. I think I did more in undergrad, to be honest, than when I was in high school. Um, I think, choose things that you enjoy. Like I wouldn't join volunteer with something that you genuinely have no interest in, because even if it looks good on a CV, like you're not going to, I'm all for like, I think you should make the most of something that you enjoy, and then it will in turn look good, reflect well on your CV. Things that, having gone through the process of applying for a lot of scholarships, getting some scholarships, I think if you want to be strategic about it, like looking for ways that you can build leadership experience early is important. That can be leadership in anything. It doesn't have to be in a scientific topic, for example. It can be like a sports organizing. I don't do sports, if you can tell, but like just some way to build leadership. And then the other big thing I think is maybe like event organization or event administration. Those are things that I see come up in a lot of applications, and it's really helpful if you can start building that experience early on.
Yeah, I agree with Rashed and Courtney. They're absolutely right. Building leadership skills, it's very important. These days, getting scholarships, they put a lot of weight on not just your academic excellence, but your non-academic performance. How do you how much of a leadership spirit do you have? How do you conceive? Are you able to conceive an idea and see it to fruition? I just reviewed some applications for an internal scholarship we had in the institute, and those that got the high pointers were those that were able to come up with ideas about organizing events. You know, you look around in your high school, you come up with events, you can invite a speaker, you can, you know, get someone to speak on a particular topic. You can, I don't know how flexible it is with schools, and fundraising. You can work with committees for fundraising activities, and you can actually champion that activity. For me, that is really, really important. And volunteering, whether in your school or out of your school, gives you very high points in getting scholarships.
Wait, can I add one more thing? Just because I'm seeing some questions come in, and someone was saying like, how can I balance like a really like tough undergrad with volunteering? Like, how do I have the time? I don't think it's something that you have to commit like a given number of hours to. Like, I really don't think that. Maybe in high school, I can't remember, like, I think that, matters more maybe. Like you say, I volunteered 100 hours with this place. I think it's given less weight than that in like after high school, and it's more about, I think it looks honestly better if you can, volunteer or maybe once a week or something, volunteer with someone over the course of like a couple years. I think that says more than spending like all day every weekend volunteering somewhere. And the other thing, I can remember. No, maybe it'll come back to me later. Sorry.
And it doesn't have to be just you, right? They also look at how good of a team player you are. So you have to come up with people to help you. You can have the idea, but then you need people, because if you do it alone, then you're selfish, you're not a leader, right? So then it balances out. It's not really about the number of hours, it's about the impact you make.
I think that's like a nice little way to end. I mean, unfortunately, I would love to answer all of these questions. So panelists, feel free to answer some more in the chat while we do the wrap up. But Trisha's going to launch that exit poll that I was talking about that you need to complete if you want the certificate credit. So please complete it. Hopefully the questions aren't too hard. We're just asking you, like, do you remember what Courtney said an organoid was? Do you understand some things about social and stress and all of that? I mean, like, it's nice to see if you remember anything, but hopefully. So I'm just going to do some wrap-up slides. Full screen. All right, I think you can see it. Great, so thank you officially for attending the whole STEM Talks Neuroscience event. We hope you learned something new. I mean, I know I did, and I always enjoyed listening to neuroscience because I did my PhD in neuroscience, so these are my people, so it's fun for me. But if you do want to learn more about our team, UHN STEM Pathways, and learn about other events that we do, for instance, we do a lot of in-person events, and Courtney will be hosting like a tour of her place for our PA Day next term, so it'll be fun. But you can check out our website to learn more, UHNSTEMPathways.ca. We also post a lot on social media. For instance, on like LinkedIn, we have a page there.